I'd like to call the Tuesday, January 12th meeting of the Noblesville City Council to order at 7 o'clock. This will probably be the only meeting I ever call to order on time.
Second that.
We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Ayer, could you lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Quick reminder tonight, seating is limited to 25. The public call-in number is 1-469-998-6201. And when you're prompted, follow the conference ID 342-631-867 #. Or if you're cool, I guess it's a hashtag. Okay, Ms. Lees, could you lead us? Can we read that again? Do I need to read that again?
I would.
The public call-in number is 1-469-998-6201. When you're prompted, the conference ID is 342-631-867 #. Ms. Lees, could you call the roll?
Mr. Ayer? Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Ms. Wiles? Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The approval of the meetings for the December 12th meeting. Second. We have approval of the minutes for the December 22nd minutes. We have a second. It's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. We have approval of the minutes for the January 4th, 2020 organizational meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 4th meeting and a second. This is a hand vote also. All those in favor, raise your hand, right hand. Approval of the agenda.
President, I would like to amend the agenda, or I would move that we amend the agenda to move miscellaneous item number 1 to be presented after the approval of claims.
Second.
All those in favor of amending the agenda, please raise your right hand. Now I need a motion to approve the agenda.
President, I would move that we approve the agenda as amended.
We have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Petitions or comments by citizens. We have a very special guest here this evening, Mr. Scott Baldwin, Senator for the state of Indiana. If you would like to say a few words, we would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Common Council, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for allowing me an opportunity to speak tonight. I appreciate that very much. My name is Scott Baldwin. I'm your Indiana State Senator. I wanted to give you just kind of a quick update on what we're working about. Session is in full swing now. I am drinking from a fire hose. As a lot of you can appreciate, I'm learning on your behalf. Hopefully I'll get better at this. What I'm doing, though, is not innocuous at all because I've got several pieces of legislation this year, which is a little abnormal for a freshman senator. The great thing is the caucus down there has been very helpful in guiding me through this process, and I'm hopeful that we'll do some great work. I've got a couple notes here, some things, if you want to hear, that we're working on. I'm on several committees: Education, Commerce and Technology, Utilities. I'm on the Pensions and Labor Committee and the Environmental Affairs Committee. So I'm on 5 total committees, which means that there's 5 meetings that happen every week, and in addition to session and all the second and third order effects from that. So some things we're working on that may be of interest to the citizens of Noblesville. There's an education bill, Senate Bill 2. There was a slight anomaly in funding with how ADM was calculated in February and September. The superintendents call it the butts and seats law, and it really didn't account for virtual learning, and so a lot of the school districts were going to be looking at 85% of their funding instead of 100% of their funding. And I think there's broad support from a bipartisan perspective in having that bill amended, or having that legislation amended to ensure that they get 100%. And I sit on that committee. We're going to hear that bill. I'm going to vote yes for that, both on the floor and in the committee. There's concerns over COVID business liability. There's several bills floating around both the Senate and the House right now. I think there's broad support from a bipartisan standpoint in correcting that measure to ensure that businesses and units of government can have some immunity from COVID. There's a lot of dialogue and bills floating around right now about executive orders. There's thoughts out there that they're a bit draconian in nature. I am a proponent of a strong executive, but I do believe that the manner in which we address emergencies of public health or otherwise need to be discussed in a more broad perspective. And so I'll support legislation that seeks to not completely take powers away from our governor, because I support him in what he does, but at the same time gives some additional oversight through the Senate and the House. And so I don't know what that's going to look like yet, because there's a lot of bills that are being heard. I've got a couple bills, as it relates to law enforcement, use of force. I've got a pretty, I've got a big bill as it relates to the city of Indianapolis. There's a lot to discuss there. We don't need to unpack that tonight. I've got a couple bills related to TIF, and I've got a bill for broadband to help provide a mechanism for local communities to finance broadband initiatives through public-private projects by empowering them to pledge a different source of revenue other than tax revenue to try to solve the rural broadband problem. And then there's several bills floating around about personal health and religious liberties, especially as it relates to immunizations. And so we're hearing all these things right now in committee. And so if you want to look at the website to follow any of these, the website's iga.in.gov, and I'd be honored to answer any questions if you want to talk to me directly after this, or if you want to ask them now, or if you want to just follow me on the website. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Any questions for Mr. Baldwin?
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck, yeah.
Thank you first. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator.
Are there any other petitions? Any other comments from citizens? Jamie, is anybody online? You have a comment that you can fill out a yellow, are they still yellow? Yellow card, they're white cards out front, and hand them to the clerk. All right, we'll move on to council committee reports. First, I'd like to start with economic development. We invited Carol Sorgi here to speak on behalf of TMAP. She's unable to make it this evening, so we have Mr. Haberman.
Good evening, Council. I'm Chuck Haberman. I'm the Workforce Development Manager for the City of Noblesville, and this is Mike Rutz with TMAP.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to give you a little update on some workforce initiatives in the county. Carol is the project manager of that, leading that effort. The 21st Century Talent Region Hamilton County group is led by Carol Sergi and a group of other workforce development minded folks in the community, myself, Dan Clark, and others. And really the Talent Region initiative from the state is focused on talent attraction, talent development, talent connection. With the help of TMAP, we have focused, based on some of our goals, the efforts to build a platform to track post-secondary success rates and completions, and build a software that will
Talent
engage
pipeline.
them, talent pipeline that will continue to engage them once they graduate from high schools in Hamilton County. So if you want to explain the
Sure,
platform
so
itself.
I'll try to be brief. Basically what we do is we use data and targeted marketing to engage people, and these people typically have an affinity for Indiana or geographic areas in Indiana. So there's 30,000 names so far that high schools in Hamilton County have given us. Noblesville, I think, provided somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000. We've engaged 2,000 of them. So far, 500 have responded, and 150 want to come back. These are people from Hamilton County. So the next step is just to engage companies to actually offer them jobs and get them hired.
So the partnership is really through Hamilton County Economic Development and TMAP. We've got funding from the county, economic development, Hamilton County Economic Development's leading it, but we have buy-in from all the communities, all the school corporations, all the EDC corporations, and then workforce chambers, and business leaders and workforce professionals in the county. So to keep it brief, if you have any questions specifically about the platform, we'd be glad to answer them this evening.
I'm not sure if this is something, I imagine you are, but the housing piece of workforce development, how much is your research showing that is a potential hurdle, or is it showing some things we maybe don't know?
Definitely a challenge. This specific program won't address workforce housing, but that is an initiative, a focus of the 21st Century Talent Regions Group. That's one of the goals.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Now we will hear from the wastewater committee.
Mr. Peterson, myself, Mr. Boyce, Mr. Davis, and you, Mr. Peterson, all attended the wastewater committee meeting last Wednesday, January 6th. There was a lot of discussion regarding the new ordinance that's going to come in front of us, 010121, and regarding the tap-on fee. I'm not going to steal any of that thunder from Mr. Hellman because I know he just loves talking about the sewer in Noblesville, so I'll let him go through all that. But the impact fee has not been raised for 16 years, and the committee came to a consensus and recommend that fee be increased, and Mr. Hellman will go over all that.
Thank you. Roads committee?
Yeah, Mr. President, Roads Committee met on Friday, January 8th with Councilman Ayers, Boyce, and Smith in attendance. The bulk of the meeting, we discussed the road impact fees ordinance that we will see tonight, 020121. If adopted by council, it will go into effect August 1st this year. We analyzed a study that was generated by A&F Engineering. The ordinance does come to us tonight with a favorable recommendation from the Roads Committee. Other discussions, we talked about the Kerrigan Road Bridge project over Morse, which is actually a Hamilton County project, but will have a big impact on our citizens. Just an early warning, 90-day closure scheduled to begin March 1st. There is a communication plan within the city administration that's in process now to discuss that project. Pleasant Street, we discussed that again. It received NDOT approval of the B1 alternative. And downtown traffic and parking, we talked about that. And a desire, Mr. Ayer made a great point, that that's something we probably should refocus and re-examine once the Levinson is up and in the mix. So Swiles had moved to another committee this year, so we didn't talk about streetlights as much as we normally do. But that is our report for Roads Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Finance committee?
Yes, Finance Committee met January 7th, and myself, Will Hampton, Greg O'Connor, and Megan Miles in attendance. We've talked about the development agreement with Jason Hart, Republic, and also known as the East Bank Project. Review the proposed economic development agreement and the mixed-use project at East River Partners. And it does come to this council with a favorable recommendation.
Davis, could you move the microphone closer? Thank you.
Is that better?
Rockstar, you gotta pick it up.
Rockstar, you gotta pick it up. You probably got, you don't have to sing, but go ahead. Just
I might sing. The results of the project is a short-term general obligation bond. Again, that'll be talked about tonight. Review of the final result of the sale of the city's capital project short-term general obligation bond of 2020, which closed on 12/28/2020. We discussed the Nickel Plate Express Assistance Plan update, the status update on the city's plan to assist the Nickel Plate Express and help with the COVID-19 public health emergency, including a planned partnership with Hamilton County Tourism Commission. 10-year capital improvement plan status update. Update on status creation of the new 10-year capital improvement plan, led by engineering and supported by HNTP consultants. Chris Schultz and Joe Guerrier were there and went through all that with us. The Small Business Resilient Grants, round 2, discussion of the purpose, the structure, and the funding. Plan for the second round of grants for the Small Business Assistance Program, and that's established in response to the economic effects of COVID-19 on our merchants in downtown Noblesville. Unbudgeted reporting costs for the pre-1977 pension funds for the police and fire, and then also the routine budget adjustments, again, with council authorization to make the routine budget adjustment throughout the year with certain parameters without individual formal council action. I believe that's going to be discussed a little bit tonight also. Other than that, the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation. That's it.
Mr. Davis, can I have a motion to approve the claims?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the claims in a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand.
President, I would just point out, and Mr. Davis did an excellent job of presenting that information, but that GO bond that we issued was issued at 70 basis points, so I think the administration and this council should be commended for their fiscal responsibility. You don't get those kind of rates if you don't have the rating to go along with it, so I think that's just one thing that the taxpayers can rely on, and we'll maintain that rating and continue to get as favorable an interest rate as we can when we go to the market.
Thank you. Did we vote on the claims?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the agenda. Miscellaneous 1, which was moved up. And that is council to consider resolution RC 1-21, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with East River Partners LLC, Andrew Murray, and Mr. Jensen.
Even better,
Even better.
Mr. President. You'll get to hear from both of us tonight. Good evening, council. Mr. President, congratulations. Great to see you there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would like to just echo quickly State Senator Scott Baldwin. Thank you. That is the first time in my term here at City Hall that a sitting legislator has spent some time with us, so especially so early in his term. So I appreciate that. And I can say Scott is a friend of Noblesville and a friend of all of us, and will be a heck of a legislator down at the State House, and I appreciate him being here tonight. I'm here on another point this evening to present to you Resolution 1-21 that would approve an economic development agreement with J.C. Hart and Republic Development to redevelop real estate along the river at 6th Street and Connor. Now, I would just like to acknowledge and have you go with me for a minute on a ride. Every morning I get up, and as I come into work with my cup of coffee, I travel east on State Road 32 and head down the hill by Riverview Health, a beautiful gateway to our city, and cross Connor Street Bridge. Immediately look to the left and have nothing but nostalgia for my hometown. And I then immediately look to my right and wonder how that filling station is still there. So I am here tonight to talk a little bit about the redevelopment of that site, and it gives me a lot of great pride to do so. It's a site that we've all talked about for a long time, and I have to acknowledge some key partners in this, our friends at the county commissioners and county council, who were a willing seller of their parking lot to a developer. So I have to thank them for their involvement in this process, and it's a project that I'm sure those who have been on the council longer than I have know that we have talked about at great nauseam for some time. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about it. I'm confident that this decision, this vetting process that we have gone through, is bringing the right project at the right time for this development along the river. It's another project under our administration that shows a sign of significant investment in our downtown and continues to create and enhance a 24/7 ecosystem in downtown. Andrew Murray wrote that, but I like that 24/7 ecosystem in our downtown. So I'm here tonight, going to be joined shortly by a good friend of mine, John Hart, who is of J.C. Hart, and I have to give John Hart a lot of credit because John Hart has worked and worked and worked and negotiated and negotiated and negotiated this with us ad nauseum, but that's how you know you get a good deal for your taxpayers. And I know John Hart's committed to that. And I think he knows after this that the city of Noblesville is certainly committed to that too. So I appreciate that. Rick Arness and Sean McGinnis represent Republic Development on this project as well. Both companies are of highest quality development and combined have over 85 years of real estate experience. So quickly to orient you, I think I hopefully painted a quick picture. But the project is 3.4 acres, the site is, and it's located on the southwest corner of Connor Street and 6th Street, with key frontage on the White River. The project, which is aptly named the East Bank, consists of the developer investing over $47 million into this project, into our downtown residential mixed-use development, 219 luxury apartment units, 5,295 square feet of commercial and office and retail space, plus 295 space parking garage. I'll pause on that to note that unlike some other projects that we have proposed in the past, this is a privately owned parking garage that will be utilized there for the residents who live there as well as the users of the retail commercial establishments that are there. Again, in the past, I know we've talked other projects that you've seen come to the council before. We are the owners of and operator of the parking garage. This is privately owned and operated, and I think that's really important. So a few benefits. This adds market demand to our downtown businesses. It adds talent to our employment base, which you heard Chuck Haberman and his team talk about earlier. It adds commercial and residential options. It revitalizes an underutilized space, real estate along the river, and it also adds vibrancy to our White River and Riverwalk Trail. And I'll add one more bullet point. It allows people a front row seat to all the good work that our clerk, Evelyn Lee, does at Riverside Cemetery, who's worked tirelessly to beautify that place over the last several years. So now we'll have some residents that get to take advantage of that. So we probably do like a tour through Riverside Cemetery after dawn or something. So, all right. I'm getting off my notes. That's what happens. All right, so tonight you're going to see, if all goes to plan, the council can expect future business items to come before you regarding our obligation to this project. It will create a TIF allocation area, and you'll also see a bond issuance of approval coming forward. So with that, I'm going to conclude my thoughts. I will just mention, I think Mr. Davis mentioned earlier, that this project does come with a favorable recommendation from the city's finance committee, the council finance committee. With that, I would like to invite Andrew Murray to come to the lectern. He will go over the individual financial incentives and details surrounding the project offered tonight. So thank you very much.
Very well summarized, Mayor. Thank you, President Peterson, members of council. Again, Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director. I'm just going to cover the key deal terms from an incentive financial standpoint. Really hit on three components. Number one, there's real estate on this subject site that is currently right-of-way, so as part of our commitment in this arrangement, we will convey that right-of-way to the developer for the completion of the project. Number two, as the mayor alluded to, we're going to provide a financial contribution in the form of a TIF bond. That structure would be a developer purchase bond. I think we're all very familiar with the risk minimization behind that structure. As far as TIF allocation goes, the city will collect the equivalent of $50,000 of first dollars of TIF generated from this project before any TIF is the remaining TIF is pledged, the debt service of the bond. There is one caveat, and that is the developer is going to make an upfront payment to us at closing on that bond for the first 5 years, which is $250,000, and this is simply just for underwriting purposes. From a bond proceeds standpoint, we anticipate a not to exceed $9.9 million bond. Again, the project costs that are or bond proceeds that will be made available, those will go to non-garage related project costs, and then the remaining proceeds will cover capitalized interest and cost of issuance. I think it's important to note that we're going to size the bond based on reasonable TIF projection and assume no growth. Obviously, we're going to hope for growth, anticipate growth of this project, and if there is growth, we do have a sharing arrangement of that excess TIF where we will share 70-30 split, annual split, to allow the developer to recoup a portion or all of certain project costs. And then lastly, the project is estimated to have approximately $1.2 million in impact fees. That's road, sewer, park impact fees, and we have agreed to cover 15% of that cost. So yeah, with that, I will stop there. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Questions? No? Mr. Hart, would you like to add anything? Came all this way.
John Hart, J.C. Hart Company, offices at 805 City Center Drive in Carmel. Just here to thank you for your support for our project. It's been a long haul. We've been working with the county for over 2 years now to secure the rights to purchase the property, and the prior administration talking through potential financial support for the project. And it's hard to believe it's been this much time, but we're excited to be in front of you tonight for your consideration and really appreciate your support. And we are very excited about the project. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, is Mr. Murray still there? I suppose I could have asked Mr. Hart this question, but when do we anticipate after bond closing? What's our timeline on this?
2 years completion. Yeah.
Start construction?
Close this summer, probably start no later than August or September start date. It can give us 2 years to complete.
Just want to make sure that we're moving ahead.
Any other questions? No
Mr.
questions?
President?
Yeah.
I would move that we approve Resolution RC-1-21.
Second.
Excuse me, there's a motion to approve Resolution RC 1-21 and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to new ordinances. Council to consider ordinance 010121, an ordinance providing for the payment of availability and connection costs for developers and new users of the Noblesville sewage works and establishing a public hearing.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Apologize, get my presentation set up. Good afternoon, Council. Before we have you is the sanitary sewer connection availability fee ordinance. This is kind of the presentation that Mr. Ayers said earlier today that I gave to the utility committee. Going to kind of talk over here for a little bit. Also introduce Andre Riley with Baker Tilly and his team who did the rate study. Give you a little background on this. Sometimes this is referred to tap-on fee, connection fee, system development charge. There's a lot of aliases that go around with this. As it was stated earlier, the last time this ordinance was updated was in 2004. The fee is for new sewer connections and change of use. When I say change of use, you go from a retail use, which is a low sewer use, to a restaurant, which is a high sewer use. So this does not impact existing customers. There will be terminology of EDU within the presentation. EDU is an equivalent dwelling unit. It is basically what the state says is the amount of water that a home uses, a single-family home uses per day, which is 310 gallons. And a lot of this report was done 2 years ago. American Structure Point updated our master plan with some of the information that was updated in that master plan. We had Baker Tilly provided a rate study, and from there I'm going to have Andre Riley come in and discuss that.
Thank you, Jen. Good evening, Mr. President, other council members. My name is Andre Riley. I'm with the accounting firm of Baker Tilly. We've been advising the utilities in the city for quite some time. The ordinance you have for first reading and consideration this evening is based on our accounting report. That accounting report at a very high level is a hybrid method to develop the availability fee. We look at the current equity, the current users of paid into the system, and then we look at those additional capacity projects that are going to grow the community. So there was 4 alternatives. I think the administration and Jim will talk about one. But we use a standard methodology in developing the proposed rate. So the projects looked at, I think, looked out over 20 years. And we thought it made sense to look at those 4 alternatives in sort of like 5-year chunks. As the system builds out, it's going to have a certain value. So that incremental method, or the incremental portion of the hybrid rate, we build in 5-year increments. So and I believe the administration is also going to look at the rates every 5 years instead of going 16 years. They'll look at it every 5 years just to see if they're on track, or if they need to adjust up or down to whatever the facts present themselves at that time. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Andre. A couple things I want to make a clarification. Like I said, later in today's agenda, we'll also be talking about the road impact fee. This is different. This is a sewer connection availability fee. It differs from a road impact fee. The sewer rate study is more of an accounting base. They do use some engineering master plan stuff, but it is more of an accounting based process. Hence, Andre is speaking on those items. You do not want an engineer talking accounting. Road impact fee is more of an engineering-based study. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Just want to kind of show the differences because they are both assessed at the time of new construction, but just want to kind of note those. The study boundary for the sewer fee is limited to what is the city's sewer basin. So it's what our current basin is on there. That is another difference. And one thing, like we mentioned before, we're recommending to use the 10-year build out, but we would like to look at that at 5 years. Within the impact fee state statute, it says to look at 10-year projections and reevaluate every 5 years. Keep in mind, these are growth projections and are very impacted by economics and then the other things. So basically, you want to look at 10-year projection and then reanalyze it every 5 years. That would be our proposal to kind of get the road fee, sewer fee, and also get the park fee so that we're all looking at these together. So because we're all using the same growth projections, we're using the same partner, so it just makes it a little bit more efficient. Before this slide here is within the study that Baker Tilly completed, kind of shows where our current fee is, and this is the 5-year build-out projection, 10-year build-out projection, 15 and 20. I guess when I say for 5, 10, 15, or 20, within the structure points master plan update, we looked at basically growth projections and where at critical infrastructure do we need to expand for capacity. So there are certain points where lift stations need to expand for capacity. There's points where treatment plants or the treatment plant would need to expand. So that's why you see the different incrementals, because they're looking at those as they build out. This is the comparison that they did research of what some of the other communities are. I would note that ours is a connection availability fee. It's basically this is the fee that you pay for your EDUs when you tie into our sewer. Many of the other communities, you'll have an availability fee, and then you have a connection fee on top. So you would add those together there. For example, HSE, they have their availability fee, then they have $305 on top of that. Whitestown is $750. So you would actually add those amounts to there, so you get a more apples-to-apples comparison. So we are recommending the $5,600 per EDU as the proposed fee. With the study in the current ordinance, the current fee is $2,715, and that is broken in between 6 funds. With this revised, we were actually reducing that down to 5 funds. There's 2 interceptor funds. We thought it was the best interest to combine those funds. One thing about that interceptor fund is when we have when there is development, when the developer comes in, they have to build the sewer just to serve their site, so essentially 6 feet of cover. As part of the master plan, we want to look out for what's the long-term benefit for our community in extending sewers at a depth and size to be able to collect and continue and have managed growth. So with that, the interceptor portion can be credited for what they call oversizing and upsizing. So let's say you just need a 6-inch sewer right here to serve their site. If we need to make that like a 24-inch sewer and it's got to be down here, we pay for the additional depth and we pay for the additional size. So some of the easier developed ground in town, we only had for $500 per EDU credit. This allows to get over some of those hurdles of the easier developed ground where we have a mechanism in place to give them credit so that they would build it and then they would be credited for the actual cost that they incurred. So and this is kind of, for the most part, we matched roughly the same percentages that we'd used before. Like I said, Ray and I had a lot of conversations, even Beck and Tilly, just kind of how to work through this. So we kind of mirrored, we thought what we were doing in the past was working, but we had to get additional funds to be able to cover our growth. I want to put just a couple examples here. The sewer usage is very heavily person-oriented. When we had the utility committee meeting, there was a lot of discussion, so I thought the best thing was to provide some examples. One example here is a 1,580,000 square foot facility with 90 employees. The formula or calculation is actually straight from an IDEM table in Indiana Administrative Code. So this is essentially all ordinances that reference that code. And when you get a sewer permit through IDEM, that is the code that you have to do your calculations off of. So you would see that 90 employees times 20 gallons per day divided by the 300 gallons per day per EDU gets 5.8 EDUs. Under the proposed ordinance, that'd be rounding, $32,000. Under the current ordinance, that would be $15,000. I can go through these other examples, but I just know there's kind of some questions on there. But if you notice, most of these, the office building, again, it's based strictly on number of employees. Restaurant, because it is a higher water use, it's actually based on the seats in the restaurant. So that's why that calculation is not really based on employees, but seats in the restaurant on how many people will be using at one time. So any questions on what I've went through so far? And also just some of the projects I select here are just probably one of the more common projects that everyone has a familiarity about. So we went through the current rate, what the 5-year build out, the proposed 10 years, 15, and 20 years. And again, this is just to kind of show you an example that you know what these projects look like. You have a better feel just to kind of see what we're talking about for fees on these kinds of projects. And that is all I have for my presentation at this point. Do you have any questions of anything that I've presented or any other questions in general?
President, Mr. Hellman, good to see you this evening.
Good, thank you.
In the proposed rate, Andre may have touched on it, but I'm trying to get a sense of when do we think we're going to have to expand the plant itself? And is that, are we factoring that into the $5,600, or is that's going to, will it be above and beyond that? I guess I'm just trying to get some sense of when that might happen, and I suppose the wastewater committee probably talked through that, but.
No, that's a good question. I'm sorry, lost my slides for a second. One thing I would note, if you see per the projections, we're anticipating a plant expansion required roughly around year 15. So if you can see, there's kind of a jump. There's at year 10, we have there's lift station 20 and 24, which need which would need expansion in year 10, and then year 15, the next big item is a plant expansion. So that's why you see in year 10, we're getting 2/3 of the plant expansion cost, but if you look at the 15-year build, you're getting 100% of the anticipated plant expansion cost. So that's kind of why the difference is at the different years. That answer your question?
And I think if we're gonna review this every 5, I think that'll become a little clearer as time goes on, but that's certainly one of the things with the growth that we're gonna have over the next several years, and it's gonna come fairly quickly. Just need to be cognizant of what that cost is gonna be. So, no, I appreciate that. That helps.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? If there's no other questions, we need to establish a public hearing.
I would move that we establish a public hearing for ordinance number 01-01-21 to be held on January 26th.
Second.
There's a motion to establish a public hearing for ordinance 010121 on January 26th, and a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. Next, council to consider ordinance 020121, an ordinance adopting road impact fees and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Hellman.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Thank you again, Council. This is similar to the presentation that that was provided this last Friday at Roads Committee. Apologize, I'm used to using a mouse, and my mouse decided to die in the process. Road impact fee, purpose and need for the fee, it's to pay for roadway improvements necessitated by new development. It equally applies the cost of the improvements to the users who are creating the need. The fee cannot be used for maintenance. The fee cannot be used to remediate existing deficiency. If there's already an identified issue from a capacity issue, the fee cannot be used. That'd have to be used from another funding source. Also, the fee is paid at the time of the building permit, so similar to what I mentioned for the sanitary sewer, this is not impacting existing residents and stuff. These are for new developments, residential and commercial. A little bit of background. Ordinance is updated every 5 years. That's by state statute. The effective date of the ordinance must be at least 6 months after the adoption. For the purpose of this, we're looking to present on January 12th, January 26th, so I just assumed February 1st, so we'd look at having an effective date of August 1st of 2021. The last ordinance was adopted in March of 2016. It was effective on January 1st, 2017. We previously went through Planning Commission December 14th, and as with last Friday at the Roads Committee. How is the fee determined? We prepare a zone improvement study. That's basically the language that's used in the state statute. From there, we do basically what we generically call a road impact fee study. We determined that D is an acceptable level of service. Basically, the Highway Capacity Manual is the methodology that does the analysis for here. They basically went through an A through F grading system, however they added the letter E for whatever reason. Level of service D is what essentially all local municipalities use as their level of service there. Essentially, it's 55 seconds of delay if you were at a traffic signal. State Department of Transportation's use a level of service E, but this is just consistent to there. Roadway segment, we do a level of service E. That doesn't really have as much impact because your intersections are basically your bottlenecks. That's where you have the conflicts of traffic and with turns and stopping and stuff like that. The first step of the study is that they will do traffic counts at all the existing intersection roadway segments, then take those traffic counts and apply them to the current condition. If it's a four-way stop, they apply those traffic counts to the four-way stop and see what the report turns out. The next step is that we look at all of the undeveloped vacant parcels and then project what we think is going to grow in the next 10 years and put whatever the land use is and with a comprehensive plan. And from those different land uses, that will determine how much additional traffic that we anticipate over this 10-year projection. One thing I do want to clarify, with the road impact fee study, we actually go all of our corporate boundaries and also what we anticipate to be in our corporate boundaries. So we do look all the way to Madison County to the east, just so in case something develops that there would be eligible for it, and we are looking at 10-year things, so we are looking at what could potentially happen out there. So back to step 2, so once we will take the existing traffic, add the projected traffic, and then we'll analyze the existing conditions and see what level of service comes out. For those intersections and roadway segments that come in below an acceptable level of service, the consultant analyze to figure out what is the appropriate time of mitigation. For example, like it could be a roundabout, could be added lanes, and then if there is no existing deficiency, that cost would be eligible for the road impact, And then all those projects are basically compiled in the table, which I'll kind of get to later. So with all of the for the construction costs of the mitigated improvements came out to roughly $187 million. Then through the study of the 10-year projections, we're anticipating 480,000 additional trips. So you basically take that $187 million divided by the 480,000 trips. So the study recommended $390 per trip. And I will get on. What we are proposing is $370 per 24-hour trip. This is a 5% reduction, and after the 5% reduction, that will be split between two funds. $326 per trip will be put into the general road impact fee fund, and then there will be another fund of $44 per trip that will be put into a Pleasant Street fund, which we use exclusively for the purposes of Pleasant Street. So all that money that's related to that will be dedicated to there. For comparison, Westfield's current fee is $327 per trip, and then next year it'll go up to $337. Fisher's is currently $260 per trip, but they're currently in the process of updating their ordinance, so they will be in the relatively near future, they'll have to be updating that. One thing, most of my examples here are Hamilton County communities. Hamilton County communities have been seeing growth over the last 20 years. For example, some of the other communities which have not seen are just now experiencing growth. When you have an empty, what I'll call rural road with no cars on it, you have plenty of room for additional traffic before you come to a capacity. Since we've been having this growth over time, that rural road is a busier road, so we are to the point where we do need to add capacity when we get new residents. So this is just applying that fee to the ones who are the ones benefiting from that. How can the funds be used? The funds have to be used specifically to what are identified projects within the study. Table 5 is the intersections, and it has the applicable cost. One thing to note, the study looked at 226 intersections. 63 of those intersections were determined to be eligible and have an associated cost to mitigate growth over the next 10 years. Table 6 is the roadway segments. 24 segments out of 277 studied were eligible and have funds or road impact fee eligible in the study. Again, this comes down to a lot of it is your intersections are your choke points and your bottlenecks of where you have crossing traffic, which causes delay. Well, also one thing to note, this level of service is a delay measure, not necessarily a safety issue. There's a correlation overlap, but like for the analysis here, we're just looking at capacity. Again, similar to what I did for the sanitary sewer, I just put a couple of projects of what our current trip is versus our proposed. One thing I would like to highlight is the Cityscape project. That was previously a marsh. Marsh is a retail use, which is a very high user of trip generation. Low use for sewer usage, but they're a high trip for there. So actually the prior marsh use offset any need for any additional road impact for that development. The other ones had credits available for what was the prior uses. Any questions on what I've went so far? Either you're asleep or I'm not covering the material well.
You're doing well.
I'm good with either.
You're doing great.
Generation rate, similar to the other one. These are some of the different types of uses. ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, is basically the manual where we go through these. We do apply them across the table, but also one thing, it is a manual. They don't always look in things. When staff does these reports, we will basically do through the report, and then we'll also start looking at how many parking spaces do they have. Like, are we getting 100 trips, but there's only 10 parking spaces? Is it realistic to get that kind of turnover? So we do look at employee counts, what kind of deliveries, because we do have like a little form they fill out to give a lot of information about the business, so that we're applying them fairly. Again, this is just a table from the study from A&F of just different types of uses, what size they would, and what the applicable fee. Would note that their study recommend $390 per trip, and this is actually just based on their study, so you would just basically adjust it down. I'm happy to go through the project list and the individual ones here, or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. This is available online. I'm happy to send a link out to it on there. 412 pages for the primary document, and you probably got 1,000 of all the counts, so there's a lot of fun reading for you if that's your thing. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address those at this time.
In that chart, the today's cost, what was the difference between that?
That is basically noting if there's today's cost is basically noting if there's a current deficiency. Okay. So the ones that have in today's cost is noting there's a current deficiency. Actually, that kind of brings me to the point. All of the roadway segments that are 100% in the city's jurisdiction where we had both cross streets, we actually had passing level service. There are intersections where we had existing deficiencies where a local road was crossing with either a state highway or a roadway under another jurisdiction, i.e. 146th Street. So with this study, we can only apply the cost what is our portion or our approach onto that intersection. So you could see some of these intersections that on a state highway, it's a relatively small amount, but we can only put the portion that's on ours. But we have used this funding for this from the prior study to help pay for the cost at the State Road 32 and River Road. So that some of those funds that we've collected before are being applied for that purpose.
Their current fee?
$250 per trip.
Questions?
President, I appreciate all this detail. It's great. I'm trying to get a handle on, from a context perspective, you got level of service at D, A, B, like, I mean, D's presumably is the standard that munis are using, but what are C, B? Can you give me just a little color around that so that?
I think there's a roughly, and I apologize, I don't remember those offhand. Usually it's about a reduction of about 10 to 15 seconds per grade as you go up for the intersection. Intersection's the easiest one.
So it's time.
Yeah, it's time or delay at the at the intersection.
I mean, because I don't know. That's not. I'm not an engineer, but I think most people looking into this will probably be asking the same question. What's the difference? But it's all time related.
Yeah, for the intersection, it's a time delay. Yes.
And then the $20 difference between what the consultant recommended and what we're proposing, we're just looking at that from a competitive perspective, or how did we decide?
I will let Mike kick in for this one.
Mr. Howard was here for a reason.
Yeah, the short answer is because it's required by the statute that we give credits to users who may be paying other fees or costs or taxes toward the project. So for example, in the 10-year plan, if someone moves in year 3, their home, it's passed through to them, they pay the impact fee. But in addition to that fee, we're supposed to give them credit for anything they might pay for the rest of the time. So if we use their lit, their income tax, we use some of that for some of these road, we must apply a credit. That credit is a rounding number. Essentially, we've used 10% on our parks and 10% on our roads in the past. This study is, this is my 4th one of these, and this study is substantially more in depth. The administration wanted to see that more in terms of about 5%. But I think we do have to acknowledge that there will be random situations out there. In all fairness, to calculate that credit, you'll probably spend more money calculating it than it's worth. So it's just a rounding number to show that we acknowledge the duty that there could be a credit, and we impose a average number in that place. Does that help?
Oh, that helps, thanks. I think, just add some clarity to why.
If I could follow up, Mr. President. Is there a cap on that credit? We're looking at 5% from this engineering study, but is there a cap after the 5%?
Well, that is the number that's in there, that we put in the ordinance to say we acknowledge that there could be a credit to an impact fee payer. Understand that impact fee is paid when the building permit's pulled on the house, for example. And to calculate what that person might pay, et cetera, would take quite a bit of time. There is an impact fee board here, and if someone wants to look at section 1321 and try to prove that we owe them a bigger credit, well, maybe they could do it. But at the end of the day, they're probably going to spend a lot of time proving that. And they would approve, their avenue is the impact fee review board, which again is mandated by statute and is established in our ordinance. I think the first 2 years we had a road impact fee, we had 3 appeals, and the petitioner's reasoning was it wasn't fair. And so those were denied, and we haven't heard any appeals since then. Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. O'Connor's question, when it comes to the level of services time, which comes with the money factor, do we have a sense of going from D to C?
At that point, you're going to be, you're actually, once you start improving it, then we're probably creating deficiencies. So then we're creating an issue where we have to come up with general local funds to offset those to get to that base level.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing no questions, I need a motion to establish a public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to establish a public hearing for ordinance 020121 on January 26th. And a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Pat.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council to consider ordinance 030121 and ordinance amending ordinance 150319 and updating the facade improvement grant guidelines. Kayla Arnold. I need a motion to introduce.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Good evening, Council. You have in front of you an ordinance requesting updates to the facade grant manual. Some of those notable updates include adding eligibility requirements that applicants cannot have any outstanding code compliance issues, changing the submittal deadlines from March 31st of the year to the end of the month on a monthly basis. To revert back to that, we thought it was better for any kind of shifting of building or businesses so that they would be eligible as soon as they're moving in, as opposed to having to wait until the next year. And then also adding in building murals under the small projects grant. This would allow murals to be eligible for reimbursement up to $2,500 for a $5,000 mural. And that's the majority of the updates. So just some grammatical things as well. We also added some before and after pictures to showcase visually what the program has accomplished.
Are there any questions?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have a question, Kayla, or Mrs. Arnold, about the reimbursement up to the $2,500. I mean, some artists are at a higher scale than other artists.
Sure.
Is this being done at a per square footage or rate, or?
We actually would like to bring this back with a red line to add that in. So since murals aren't a project that are traditionally bid out, we consulted with Nickel Play Arts, who is our arts consultant, and their advisement is $25 per square foot is the market rate for the area, and so that business and building owners will be eligible for a reimbursement of $12.50 per square foot up to that $2,500.
Questions?
President.
Yes, sir.
Kayla, what kind of demand are you seeing now for the program, just out of curiosity?
Sure. So in 2020, we actually had 9 projects that were started and or completed. And that totaled more than $340,000 in total investment between public and private dollars. So it's definitely still there.
Still being used?
Absolutely.
You have the total numbers invested in this program over?
The program started in 2008. Total private dollars are more than $1.3 million. Total city grant dollars are just shy of $1.1 million for a total investment of $2.4 million in combined. And that is also totaling 71 total grant projects, which include the architectural assistance, small grants, and the vast majority of those were in our downtown corridor.
One question, I know we expanded the region a couple of years ago now, and I know the old schoolhouse is
Yes.
doing something. Has there been any other applicants in that kind of newer area?
We have not, so we haven't received any applicants for that. There was some talk of a business applying for one that was on South 10th Street, but that was back pre-COVID. We hadn't seen anything come through for that yet.
Here. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Need a- What? See you in 2 weeks. I need a motion to establish public hearing. We already did that.
No.
So I don't need that again. Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 040121 amendments to an adopted plan development ordinance known as Noble Creek Plan Development. Joyce Ann Yelton.
Move to introduce.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
President? This is a project that involves Riverview Health. As an employee of Riverview Health, I am going to abstain or keep voting on this project either this evening or in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Again, Joyce Ann Yelton, Development Services Manager for the City of Noblesville. This ordinance, basically, as you can see by on the overhead projector here, the location of this is at the southwest corner of Noble Creek Drive and Cherry Street. Basically, what is being proposed here is the expansion of 4 additional parking spots, which will be along the west side here, eliminating a side yard setback of what would be 5 feet. The other thing that they are doing is proposing 10 total parking spaces out here in the front. There is what we call a green space area that will be encroaching into. This building has been here along with what I'm going to call this eyebrow area, which was a drive-through, since the late 90s. I'm not really sure how the drive got there without seeking some sort of variance or approval, but it did. So basically what they are doing is, I'm going to say, kind of squaring off this area so that this becomes all parking. However, it will not currently encroach any closer to Cherry Street than what is currently existing. There are there is landscaping out in this area that will basically have to be removed. They will be adding landscaping back to that area. And again, the 4 additional parking spaces along here are basically for employees, as this would be an entrance into the back side of the building. This was sent to you from the Plan Commission with a 9-0 vote recommendation for adoption. I will ask if you have any questions of staff. Also in the audience are Scott Tripp with Riverview Health and Nathan Winslow with American Structure Point, should you have any questions of them.
I think the only thing that came up at Plan Commission was the canopy is being removed, so you're not backing into cars. That was clarified.
That is
Thank you.
correct.
Any questions?
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
Just one question. Joyce Ann, is there any parking on the eastern border where the trees are? Isn't there parking there now?
Yes, yes, there is.
That's not going to be affected by this, is it?
No. Here's kind of another plan, as you can see. This would be their additional parking. This already exists, and then there would be the 4 additional parking spaces along the western property line.
So that green strip there, will that just disappear on the western edge?
Yeah, a portion of it will disappear.
Almost like not worth mowing it.
Yes, as you can see, again, that was an area that, yeah, it's basically an area that's about, I believe, I want to say 9 feet wide. I don't think it's quite that. It may be only 5 feet wide. But, yeah, right in this particular area where the 4 parking spots will be, yes, that green space will go away. Next to this is a muffler shop. You know, they do have a green space along here adjacent to their parking.
President, sir, what's the purpose? Are they having trouble with parking as far as spilling out where it shouldn't, or is this for expansion, or what's the reason for that?
Mr. Tripp did a good job of explaining. I don't know if you want to speak about the change of use that's going on this property. That was kind of the explanation.
Yeah, that'd be great to hear from
Mr. Tripp would like to, you came all this way, Scott.
Good evening, Council. Scott Tripp, Riverview Health, 395 Westfield Road. So originally when we developed this property, the north third of it or so was a bank. And as you can imagine, with the increased health needs from this last year, we would like to increase our capacity with physicians and patients. So this is to provide more medical in a building we already have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're saying by ordinance, how many parking spaces would we normally be required for a facility like this? Elton, I'm sorry.
Parking is basically based on, I want to say 1 per, I believe it's 200 square feet of building area. I'm going to have to assume that when this was constructed, there was sufficient parking at that time, because I can't find any approval of any variances or waivers that were given when this structure was built.
Any other questions? So thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. So council to consider ordinance, we're going to do these two together, 05, 0121, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the 1937 Fire Pension Fund for funding annual reporting costs and establishing a public hearing.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Also, council to consider ordinance 060121, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the 1925 Police Pension Fund for funding annual reporting costs and establishing a public hearing.
Motion to introduce.
Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and the good news I can tell you about this additional appropriation ordinance is that it's extremely simple. It actually is just really an error correction, and there is truly no financial impact to the city from any of this activity because all of the costs that are incurred out of the funds that this and another similar ordinance are associated with are 100% reimbursed to us by the state, but you still legally have to go through this action to appropriate the funds and expend the money. And so basically what we're doing here with this is we're correcting an error in the 2021 budget where failed to include an appropriation amount to pay for certain financial analysis service, actually an actuarial analysis of this fund. Had the same problem in the 2020 budget, and you just had an action for that at one of the December meetings. We're getting out ahead of this for the 2021 budget, and my pledge to you is we won't forget to budget for it in 2022. So with that, it's just correcting a technical error in the 2021 budget.
Any questions on either item?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I'd move to establish a public hearing for 05-01-21 at our January 26th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand.
President,
Yes.
I would move that we establish a public hearing for ordinance 0601-21.
Second.
There's a motion to establish a public hearing for ordinance 060121 on January 22nd. And a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Or in a few minutes.
Or in a few minutes, or now.
For now.
Council to consider ordinance 070121 and ordinance funding additional appropriations in the general fund for funding the Small Business Resiliency Grant Program and establishing a public hearing.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Again, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and this ordinance is a little bit more substantive in nature in that is actually asking to make an adjustment to the 2021 budget for circumstances that have developed since we adopted that budget. And in this case, it is round 2 of the Small Business Resilience Grant Program that you remember from early last year. And this action, it even references back to that in this ordinance. This action is to appropriate another $250,000 from the general fund for another round of that program. I can talk to you a little bit more about, kind of the source of this $250,000 if you want me to, but for the most part, it's just, coming from reserves that are in the general fund that exist to some degree because of CARES Act reimbursement and things like that that occurred in 2020. Any questions?
Questions?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I would move that we establish a public hearing for ordinance 07-01-21 at our January 26th meeting.
Second.
Motion to establish a public hearing for ordinance 070121 on January 26th. And a second. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. All right, we did miscellaneous. Council to consider a resolution RC 2-21, a resolution authorizing appropriations transfers for certain routine budget adjustments. Mr. Spalding.
Again, Mr. President, members of the council, are we on 21? Oh, actually, there's a typo. That should be 20. Or is it? Oh, wait. You're right.
That's right.
You're right. It's 2 and 3, not 20 and 21. Just was looking at the wrong one in my packet. Again, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and the resolution you have before you is, again, now what we're establishing is a somewhat routine practice for the city of Noblesville. We had it in place for last year. And in essence, it is you as the fiscal body have all appropriation authority, and this is your kind of authorization to me and my office that for very small technical budget adjustments that are fiscally neutral, they don't increase or decrease the overall budget of the city, or frankly, any department, that you have provided me with this resolution, the authorization to make those types of transfers within budget transfers within a limit of no more than $50,000 per transfer and no more than $125,000 in a fiscal quarter. And along with that authorization, a requirement that I report back to the council on a quarterly basis to say, hey, here's these small technical transfers that we've done. The one thing that I will note about this that is slightly different from last year's ordinance is as a result of some changes we made in the budgeting of payroll costs for 2021, this adds some language in there that says if there are certain types of pay adjustments that are all within the previously approved salary ordinance that are small and technical, they're also included in this authorization. The way we budgeted for payroll last year, that was not relevant. So that's basically what it is. It's a continuation of a current practice.
Thank you. I was completely against this when it came up the first time, so I appreciate you proving me wrong, and this has been a really good program. So any other questions or discussion? Yes.
I noticed on the paper version as well as on what was online, the resolution number is RC-2-20. So we need to amend that to say R2-21. I would make a motion that we amend it to read as RC-2-21.
I'll second that.
This is a motion to amend the ordinance to read RC 0220. And a second, there's a hand vote.
Well, you're moving to 21.
21.
You amended it to 21.
I'd like to amend it to RC 0220.
RC.
You're going to amend RC 220.
RC 221.
I need to stop reading what's in front of me and listen to what people are saying. I'd like to amend, we have a motion to approve, to amend this, just read RC 0220.
One. Outstanding.
Mine says 21. All right.
Not on the actual.
On the actual ordinance, it's wrong.
Yeah,
We have a second.
on the,
There's a hand vote.
That's-
All right. Wow.
Mr. President.
Yes, thank you.
I will move that we approve Resolution RC-2-21 as amended.
Second.
We have a motion to approve RC 2-21 and a second. There's a hand vote. Those in favor, raise your hand.
You got through it.
I almost made it. All right, council to consider resolution RC 0321, a resolution authorizing the appropriation of grant proceeds. Mr. Spalding.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, again, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and this conceptually is very similar to the resolution you just passed, but it is new, and again, in trying to, professionalize and structure the processes and acknowledge the authority of the council. Basically, what this resolution is saying is that in the case of the receipt of grant proceeds that the city gets from time to time, rather than having to come to the council every time we get a new grant and go through an appropriation action, this says under certain circumstances, which basically fit most of the grants that you receive as a local unit of government, but under those circumstances, which is that the grant specifies what the allowable expense is, that I don't need to come to the council, I can just make put the money in the proper funds and make the adjustments as necessary because the grant is constraining what it can be spent for. And again, along with what we have pledged to do with the other items, we will bring a report, my office will bring a report back to the council quarterly throughout the year to say, hey, here's the various grant proceeds that we received and effectively appropriated during the quarter so that you can see what actually occurred.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. President,
Sure.
I move that we approve Resolution RC-3-21.
A motion to approve RC 0321 and a second. There's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our business. Are there council comments? Mr. Schwartz?
Mr. President, I do have a quick comment. I just wanted to give.
You gotta lean in, sorry.
Sorry, I forgot Rockstar. Just wanted to give some kudos to Brandon Bennett, Parks Department, and everybody involved. Being here my entire life, I think the holiday lights have been the best they've ever been. My wife has been making me watch Lifetime holiday movies over the last little bit, and I can say that we really could put on a stage for one of those movies. So I just want to give kudos to everything that was done with holiday lights involved. Excellent job.
Thank you. Are there other council comments?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Mr. Peter.